اللهم صل على النبي وآله وصلاة بها تحفظنا من قالوا.
اللهم صل على النبي وآله صلاة بها تحفظنا من قالوا.
عبدك يا كريم اصلح فساد حاله، جمل بالتقى واملا به رحاله، واحفظ في مقام ايضا وتر حاله، وانغذ يا كريم من ورطته وحاله، والوزر المسجل عنه أمحاله، صلاة بها تحفظنا من قالوا.
Resumed on the Sudanese prophetic Madih poetry. I'm so delighted, dear audience, welcoming you in this new episode, which in fact is the continuation for the prophetic Madih in Sudan series. And in this episode, just here, I would like to present the reasons and the instruments and tools that the Sudanese Sufis have utilized in the way of dissemination of Islam from a side and the fragrance of the prophetic Madih from another side. However, since the advent of Islam, following the arrival of Sufis to the country, Sudanese Sufis employed tools and instruments as means for the dissemination of the Islamic creed, as I have stated shortly. However, the prophetic praise poetry in Sudan have traditionally been accompanied by three instruments associated with spiritual music, that is tar or tambourine, sticks, and hand or fingertip clapping. So in regard to these tools, three instruments have been associated with the spiritual music utilized by Sudanese Sufis, mainly the prophetic Madih praise singers and poets, while at the same time, and as we have presented our episode on the reconciliation with the African tradition in the country, the Sudanese Sufis utilize drums as a means that used to be part of their Sufi circle of zikr. So in this regard, and what is concerning the prophetic Madih, unlike the Sufi circle of zikr, the nature of the Sufi circle of zikr, by the way, based on the drums, on beating the drums, while prophetic Madih, which actually in its very essence is a sort of audition or sama'. So in this concern, the Sudanese prophetic Madih praise singers utilize the usage of three instruments throughout the history of the prophetic Madih in Sudan. And as I have stated, these three instruments utilized by the praise singers were and still there, that is the tambourine or tar in Sudanese language, sticks, and sticks, by the way, had been disappeared from the scene, as we are going to see later. In addition to the hand or finger tip clapping. The tambourine or tar is the oldest instrument to accompany prophetic Madih or even popular poems and Sufis across the time. Sudanese society have also utilized tambourine, as I have stated, and it is still in the usage in the performance of the prophetic as well as the Sufi poetry in the country. In his book أدوات الحكم والولاية في السودان, the late Professor Muhammad Ibrahim Abu Salim has documented and provided some information about the history usage of tar or tambourine in the Sudanese setting. So just to quote him, the tar is a deeply rooted traditional musical instrument in Sudan. It is commonly used by our people in the northern region, especially among the Nubians, particularly the Halfawiyin. The tar is also used in Upper Egypt. In Central Sudan, it is used in Madih, religious praise poetry or chants. So this is just the view of Professor Muhammad Ibrahim Abu Salim about the history of the tambourine in Sudan. The first man who introduced tambourine in eulogy was a man called Hanin al-Masri. As mentioned before, in the 17th century, and since that time, they have been used. Tambourines have been used in the eulogy, singing, and sometimes in songs by some Sudanese tribes. Besides using this instrumental style, poetry is performed while beating sticks. So just as we have stated that the first type that used by the Sudanese, mainly the prophetic Madih singers, is the tambourine. Furthermore, also Sudanese prophetic Madih praise singers also utilize the usage of the beating sticks. The rhythm is generated by striking two sticks against one another and clapping the hands. This is a way that is the usage of the beating sticks used to be carried out by the praise singers in Sudan in the past time. The third type of the instrument that utilized by Sudanese praise singers is a hand clapping, which in its very nature is usually very quiet. In fact, the three types of the instruments utilized by the Sudanese praise singers, each has its own principles and basics, and at the same time, it needs certain skills and training. Murshi Muhammad al-Hassan, the prominent and noted researcher in the prophetic Madih in Sudan, has observed that a striking of sticks style, which is called Madih al-Asa in the Arabic language, literally the sticks Madih, is no longer practiced. It is also very hard to master. In this particular area, I would like referring you to Usman Ahmad Ibrahim in his study in praise of the Prophet, the performance and thematic composition of the Sudanese religious oral poetry, PhD and published PhD thesis, Indiana University, 1990. It's worth noting that the popularity of the Madih with the stick popularity was in late 1940s, But in our today world, mainly in the Sudanese settings, such a type of instrument has been disappeared. Rules and foundations of the tambourine. The tambourine or tar in Sudanese language has specific rules, foundational techniques and established methods that must be respected. Anyone who carried the tar or tambourine must undergo rhythm training with seasoned Madih performers who have hands-on experience and knowledge of the conventions. One of the basic rules is that the tambourine or tar should be carried by 2 or 3 individuals. There are 2 sizes of tambourine, a large one called ummiya and a smaller one known as shatam. Madih performances or Madih performances using the tambourine or tar follow 2 main stylistic directions. Which closely resemble the structure of the old Sudanese songs. Listeners who are familiar with the melodies and rhythms of the traditional Madih or eulogy will recognize a certain similarity. For example, in all Sudanese dance songs, for instance, singers begin with a heavy introductory piece, or as it's called in Arabic language, Ramya Tagila, while seated. This is followed by another heavy song performed standing, after which they sit down again. Meanwhile, the female dancer remains standing, waiting for a light song, which begins with a light ramya. The word ramya here just starting, a light starting, then transitions into a lighter melody, and this alteration continues until the end of the night. Similarly, in popular prophetic praise performances, tar or tambourine-based Madih follow this general structure, albeit with differences in rhythm style and performance techniques. Typically, a performance begins with al-murabba. And by the way, I would like also sharing you the introduction and the presentation of the different rhythm utilized also by Sudanese prophetic Madih praise singers. So among the names of the style and the rhythm that utilized by the Sudanese is what is called al-murabba. So just we're going to have it in much details. While seated and other rhythm shifts into other styles of tar music. The performance rise and continue standing. The art of the tar includes heavy, light, and moderate rhythms, much like traditional song forms. Among the established traditions of Madih al-tar, or praise singing accompanied by tambourine, is that the performers, the praise singers, open the night of Madih, of the praise or the prophetic praise or Madih, with what is called tanbih. And tanbih, it is a matter of calling attention. The way tanbih is performed is that they the praise singer beat the tambourines without accompanying them with chanting, as if to say to the people come to us. Soon enough, people gather around them. This act is known as Tanbih. So one of the tradition of the prophetic Madih culture in Sudan is that the praise singers who usually start their session following Isha prayer, they used to sit, for example, while sitting down, they just started beating the tambourines, and performing that beating without accompanying their beating with words or poems or oaths. Just they started beating the drums or beating the tambourine, in which they send a message that the Madih session will start soon. So the audience understand this message, and they used to gather around the place where those praise singers were sitting. So this is particular culture in the Sudanese prophetic Madih known as Tanbih, or drawing attention of the audience to gather and to come to the site of the performance of the art. Also, the oldest tradition, Sudanese praise singers used to start and to inaugurate the Madih session with the first composed prophetic Madihology or Oud, and that is the Oud of As-Salama. As-Salam ya Ba'alama, which it is the first Sudanese prophetic Madih Oud to be composed by Haj al-Nagar. So always, and from very ancient time, Sudanese praise singers used to initiate and to start their Madih session with this particular Oud. However, they start with the Oud of As-Salama ya Ba'alama, and they go on and concluding the session with Tahleel, chanting the word of oneness collectively and in group. La ilaha illallah, there is no God but God. As the performers raise their hands in Fatiha, recital of the opening prayer, and offer blessings and prayers for those present, the night ends in this way. Ustaz Qurashi Muhammad al-Hassan has divided the tambourine arts into 6 divisions. In other words, Qurashi Muhammad al-Hassan, the source and the researcher in the prophetic Madih, has divided the tambourine arts into 6 rhythms. They are as follows: Marbu', Mahbud, Muashir, Hambati, Harbi, and the Galashi. Popular eulogies and poems were named under these divisions, and all eulogy meters have been composed depending on these divisions. However, Qurashi has explained why these names were given. For example, if you have taken the first type, the Murabba, The Murabba was called so because its hemistages are four. Number two, the Maghboot. The Maghboot was called so because it is composed of three beats or hits. The Mu'ashir. The Mu'ashir was called so because the lines of the poem are composed of 10 beats or hits. The Hambati. This is number four. The Hambati was called so because the tambourine hit is too similar to the hits of the luka, another Sudanese instrumental musical instrument. It is also called Banati. Number five, the Harbi. And the Harbi was called so because the rhythm is ardent. Number six, the Dagalashi. The Dagalashi was called so because the rhythm is light and dancing from the light Shaigiya songs. So this is just the division that have been stated by Qurashi Muhammad al-Hassan in his documenting to the Sudanese prophetic Madih tradition. Qurashi mentioned what he called Harbi Gaddura and Murabba Gaddura. He believed that he was the first to introduce Al-Harbi, and that has two aspects, slow and light, and it has its own Murabba. But I am of the opinion that Gaddura is distinguished by Al-Harbi. As for the Usul Harbi, it is known in all war eulogies. The Marbu' rhythm is of all narrators, or the Marbu' rhythm of all narrators is the same. In all narrators of the prophetic Madih is the same. Dear audience, I would like to remind you that I'm presenting the rhythm and the style and the tools or instruments that used to be utilized by Sudanese praise singers, mainly the prophetic Madih praise singers. So in this part of the episode, Kasi, I would like to provide some examples to the types of the rhythms or the style that utilized by the prophetic Madih singers in Sudan, based on the study carried out by Qurashi Muhammad al-Hassan in this particular area. Famous example of Marbu' praise poems include those by the Sudanese poet Wad Haja, in addition to Salih al-Amin. The latter is particularly prolific in composing Murabba. An elder performer which is very famous. I'm referring here to Salih al-Amin in addition to Wad Haja. Those two figures are so important, so significant and well-known prophetic Madih writers. One of the transmitters of Salih al-Amin words told me that 300 of Marbu' praises composed by Salih al-Amin had been memorized by praise singers. This includes or indicates the vast output of Salih al-Amin as a praise singer, prophetic writer, a heritage that passed away in the chest of his singers. However, to provide, as I told, an example from Madih, or the eulogy of Al-Murabba to the poet Wad Haja, just we quote his saying, قزاز عاجبني طولة شوقي للطيبة ورسولة. This is an example of Murabba. And another example, الشوق للرسول وبواته والشوق لمغام روضاته. More example in this area is that one composed by Wad Halib, Sheikh Ali Wad Halib, when he said, صلوا على الرسول يا إخواني ما دام العمير الفاني. To provide an example of Mahbub poems, which as I told is a type of rhythm or the type of style utilized by the Sudanese prophetic Madih praise singers. Just to quote and to provide an example, here we have the noted Sudanese praise singer Hayy al-Mahi, and to quote him in this particular type, I'm referring here to Al-Makhbut. We quote him: عيب شبابيل في بطأ ما حج ذار ماح الخطأ. Furthermore, also we provide an example to the famous Sudanese noted praise singing writer and poet Sheikh Hayati. زاد عياي مالي طبيب والله غير سيد خبيب. And another example from the noted Sudanese poet والتميم: طه مخصوص بالزعامة يا النبي الحاز الكرامة. From another hand, also as we have stated, that Harbi rhythm is part of the types of rhythm that is stated and documented by the writer and researcher Muhammad al-Hassan. So the Harbi rhythm was named as such because its beats are enthusiastic and energizing, preparing the listener for the dynamic dancing that takes place within the cycle of zikr or cycle of the prophetic session. It closely resembles the rhythm of the arda, and its composition is both complex and harmonious. To have an example from the Sudanese prophetic Madih, just we would like to quote the saying of the noted Sudanese prophetic praise poets Sheikh Ahmad Wad Suleiman: الجهاد فيا عارفين نهج السنة والسابقين. Another example in this particular area, that is the Harbi rhythm: تجنبوا أحمد الباقين قوة شوقنا له. So this is just an example to types of the rhythm that utilized by Sudanese prophetic Madih praise singers and poets. And I would like to draw your attention, the audience, that this art, I'm referring here to the prophetic Madih art in Sudan, is so rich with the presence, with great numbers of examples to these 6 types of rhythm that have been stated by the researcher Muhammad al-Hassan. So out of our presentation and introduction to Sudanese praise poetry writers in our coming episodes, example also will be cited for further clarification and introduction to this heritage, to this fine, rich artistic tradition in Sudan. The contributions of the Sudanese prophetic Madih tradition in Sudan. Prophetic Madih, that poetry composing in the praise of the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, plays a significant role in educating and shaping Sudanese society. Just to cite examples of this contribution to cite and to provide example to these contributions. Just would like to say religious education. At its core, the prophetic poetry, prophetic Madih poetry in Sudan transmits religious knowledge, values, and teachings. It celebrates the life, character, and virtues of Prophet Muhammad, serving as a powerful medium for instilling faith and devotion. Moral and ethical guidance. The prophetic Madih poems that have been written by Sudanese praise singers or praise poet writers often emphasize moral and ethical principles such as compassion, generosity, justice, and piety. These virtues serve as a reminder of the ideals to which Muslims should aspire, thus contributing to the moral fabric of society. So Sudanese poets practically, by the way, documenting the prophetic seerah and the prophet seerah, and intense the audience try to imitate and try to follow such great examples of the virtues of the excellent manners that reflected by Sudanese prophetic Madih writers. They try to be reflected in their daily life, and by this they try to acquire these excellent manners of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam practically in their daily routine activities and interaction with other human and non-human creatures. Another contribution of the prophetic Madih in Sudan could be found in the social cohesion. So prophetic Madih poems bringing people together in shared celebration and remembrance, and such poems foster a sense of community and belonging. It strengthens social bonds and promotes unity among diverse groups within the Sudanese society. Another contribution to the prophetic Madih poetry in Sudan is having to do with language and literature. So with the spread of the prophetic Madih poetry among the Sudanese, putting in consideration that such types of poetry has been written in classical or standard Arabic and in colloquial and vernacular or dialect of the Sudanese. The two features, by the way, also has played a great role in the consolidation on the dissemination of the Arabic language itself. That is because researchers, studies, dissertations used to be carried out handling this rich art by researchers in the field. So the spread of Madih poetry in Sudan in turns has also played a great role in the dissemination, in the consolidation, and at the same time became a material for investigation by researchers, and at the same time it became part of the study that carried out, as I told, by the researchers. And this is, from its part, has developed, participated in the dissemination of the Arabic language among the Sudanese. Resistance and social commentary. By the way, also poetry, the prophetic Madih writers also utilize poetry to express their dissatisfaction and displeasure at the gesture of protest during two periods. For example, if you have taken the story life of the Sudanese poet Haj al-Mahi, we found his story told that he protested against the Turkish rule who tried to halt the spread, the dissemination of this art among the Sudanese. So in that regard, Haj al-Mahi has composed his own poetry attracting or attacking the Turkish and trying to utter and pronounce his protest and represented the other Sudanese people in that regard. Another example, during the British rule, mainly in Mawlid Square, history told that Sudanese poets also composed poetry as a gesture of protest to the existence and to the presence of the colonizers. And to cite example in our coming episodes, example in that regard will be provided to you, dear audience. In conclusion, in this area, I'm taking this contribution in terms of points. So to conclude this particular area, prophetic poetry plays a multifaceted role in educating the Sudanese, encompassing religious, moral, cultural, social, and linguistic dimensions. It is a living tradition that continues to shape individual lives and collective identity in Sudan. To provide examples of Sudanese writers in this concern, I'm speaking here about the contribution of prophetic Madih in Sudan. I would like to provide two examples of Sudanese noted writers and authors, and here mainly in the literary genre. Among the Sudanese literary genre writers, here I would like to sharing you the views of the late noted Sudanese novelist Tayyib Saleh, speaking about the impact of Madih, prophetic Madih poetry, in the dissemination of the Prophet Sira. So to quote Tayyib, I don't think that one in Sudan visiting these places, Mecca and Medina, and Haj al-Mahi never crosses his mind. Particularly his poetry and the poems of those peers of him, for their poetry make up our sentiment as children, holding on the robes of our fathers and mothers to the circle of Madih on nights. Before we know the reading and writing, nor being aware with the life's matters, we know the most honest and the trustworthy messenger's birthday, his growing up, his mission, and the types of the hardships that he had experienced while in Mecca, and then his migration to Medina, where the light of the message has shone or has shined so strong, so brightened. We knew his jihad, holy war, and his companions' jihad. We knew them by their names, one after one. The knowledge transfers to our prime hearts directly, in the form of singing, full with love and passion. Such words attributed to the Sudanese noted novelist Tayyib Saleh, expressing his impact, his influence, with the prophetic Madih poetry in Sudan since his childhood. Another important significant Sudanese literary figure, expressing furthermore his influence and the impact of the prophetic Madih poetry in his future writing, is the late poet and diplomat Muhammad al-Makki Ibrahim. So in an interview with the poet Muhammad al-Makki Ibrahim, he stressed the influence of Sufism in his poetry. He states, "I opened my eyes on poetry, the Sufi poetry that our Shuyukh has written on the praising of Al-Mustafa, the Prophet Muhammad, and preaching wa'az of the Murids, to follow the path with the observation of asceticism, with manners, contentment, and modesty. The remembrances used to be held twice time a week, and we were no longer asked for participation, and it was the only night, remembrance night, shows that was available. Then I have saturated with the classical and the varied Arabic poetry, meter and rhythm. When I started writing of poetry, I found no difficulty in dealing with the awzan, meter and rhythm, sufficing in the beginning with that audible training that I had received in childhood and adulthood, and with its grace the language had passed and flowed in my child depths. Even the word that I didn't know its meaning while I was young, I continued and tend to be open before me like the rose along the process of learning, as well training, and during the process of the creative writing on poetry and prose. When I encounter a new word, I didn't feel that I met a stranger person. But a familiar face from a far past time. Such were the words of the late diplomat and poet Muhammad al-Makki Ibrahim. From his part also expressed his influence, the impact of the prophetic poetry in his future writing. I would like to remind you, the audience, I'm presenting the style, rhythm, and contributions of the Sudanese prophetic Madih in Sudan. And I would like here to draw your attention that the essence and the abundant Sudanese writing is there in the poetic production of the Sudanese poet. So Sudanese prophetic Madih is the largest production ever, not only in Sudan but also in the Islamic world. And furthermore, I would like to add that the Prophet four successors also have been provided with an abundant prophetic Madih outs. So in Sudan, the prophetic Madih genre includes poetry and outs that praise the Prophet companions, particularly the four successors, Abu Bakr, Umar, Osman, and Ali, as well as the 10 companions' promise of paradise. The Prophet's wife, particularly Sayyidah Khadija, Sayyidah Aisha, and Sayyidah Fatima, are also contributors to to Sudanese prophetic poetry.
What I mean by the ladies, Sayyidah Khadija, Sayyidah Aisha and Sayyidah Fatima, what I mean by their contribution in the Sudanese prophetic Madih is that they are a source of aspiration. Source of aspiration, their story life aspired so numerous Sudanese poets in that concern. Thus, from their part, they have their contribution in which the Sudanese poets, as I have stated, have taken their leaves, their good manners, as an aspiration through which they have composed poetry and poems in their praising.
Among the most important Sudanese figures that have spent and provided his life to document this rich art is the late researcher Ustaz Qurashi Muhammad al-Hassan. So in this space, of the episode, yes, I would like to provide short biography about Ustaz Qurashi Muhammad al-Hassan. So Qurashi Muhammad al-Hassan, 1915-1994. His biography informs that he is Qurashi Hassan Ahmad Usman Ahmad, whose lineage on his father and mother side meets with Imam. He was born in the city of Omdurman in the neighborhood of Wad Nuba in 1915 and passed away in 1994. Qurashi has played a great role in the history of the prophetic Madih as well as the Sufi poetry in Sudan. Weekly, between the years of 1958 to 1989, tirelessly and with all enthusiasm, continued presenting his famous program Adab al-Madih, the art of Madih at Omdurman Radio. The program's episodes had recorded nearly 1,000 episodes to be received in 300 cassettes. He studied Madih art, and in the middle of the 1960s, he was honored to deliver it on the radio. It took him all the way until his death to establish himself as a radio host, showcasing a variety of praise singers who, had it not been for his well-known program Adab al-Madih, the art of Madih would have been restricted to the rural communities. Additionally, he completed a significant documentary books on Madih art. Prior to his interest in Madih, Qurashi was a skilled lyric poet. He lost a singing poet, which allowed him to study Madih. That is closely tied to singing in great detail, translating and documenting Madih poets' lives and praise singers themselves. In the focus of his writings in this field, he also spent some time analyzing and interpreting texts, explaining themes related to praise, workmanship, rules of regulation, singing techniques, and instruments used in the songs, and rhythm that the praise singer poems are based on. One of the most significant contribution of Ustaz Qurashi made to Sudanese culture in this area of expertise was 1964 trip to the city of Shende and its surrounding suburbs, where he was able to gather roughly 50 folk songs as well as numerous texts of praise and melody. He also took a series of photographs of historical archaeological sites and pioneers of praise poets and praise singers. Additionally, he acquired 35 historical documents and 14 manuscripts during this trip, which he gave to the Sudan Records House in Khartoum, where they are now available for use by academics and researchers. Also, further contribution to the late Ustaz Quraysh Muhammad al-Hassan is his 4 books known as Qurayshiyat. He has provided the Sudanese religious and Sudanese library in general with 4 volumes documenting the art of Madih. The first part of his book with the poets of praise singing was released in 1965. The Sudanese Minister of Information released the second part in 1967. The Sudanese Department of Culture published the third part in 1976. That same department produced part 4 in his 1977 book Introduction to Poetry of Madih. He addressed praises, chanting, melody, rhythm in a technical sense. However, he attempted to modify tambourine rhythm by writing them in a musical note, and he employed an institute of music professor to write the musical notation for the praise melodies by modifying their rhythmic signs. In an interview with his son Osama stated that each episode handles 4 parts: short biography on the life of the Oud's poet, followed with the scientific value of Sufi songs that he, the poet, had composed, adding to an analytical study to the episode Qasida or Oud. The third part presents the value as well as the artistic characteristics of the Madih, the melodies and rhythms. The final part in the episode, which is the fourth one, provides the chance of presenting the main song. Also in the program, the opportunity left for the listeners' favorite choices to be answered. في رحاب الحبيب. So this is just such was the contribution of the late Ustaz Quraysh Muhammad al-Hassan, as I stated, in documenting the Sudanese prophetic Madih art. Another contributor to the documentation and recording of the Sudanese prophetic Madih in Sudan is that famous show, Sahratul Jum'ah, the Friday evening show, presented by Ustaz Muhammad Abdul Karim al-Majzoub. And in the present time, also efforts that led by Professor Ibrahim al-Qurashi is there in presenting, in hosting praise singers, providing each poet with an episode, documenting his biography, his style, and the types of poems that he has written. So, Shawahid al-Sira is the most important and significant prophetic Madih show or program that is transmitted across the media in Sudan, now under the supervision of Professor Ibrahim al-Qurashi. At the end of this episode, I would like to draw your attention, the audience, that 7 episodes have been provided and presented handling the history, the birth, the development, and the founders, in addition to the contributions of the Sudanese prophetic Madih. So later, a practical side of this art will be provided in much more details, handling the lives of the founders, starting with the founders, having an example of each one of them with a note. Till then, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.